All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks again to Brenda and the REdI folks for putting this on, and great job at getting us back in person. As I think I raised my hand earlier, I think I did my first REdI conference probably 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. So it's just really great to be here. And then most excited that O&D is kind of taken over this morning and maybe even filtering out into the rest of the day, because there's a lot of discussion about clinical trials. And I think clinical trials and clinical research is just so critically important to what we do at the FDA to help promote health and help improve the quality of life for patients. So what I'm going to talk about today is the new CDER Center for Clinical Trial Innovation. So I think you heard about this multiple times already today, and that's excellent. But I'm going to just reinforce it so that you leave today really remembering C3TI and what C3TI is, and it's not a robot from Star Wars. But hey, if you remember that, you'll remember C3TI. So C3TI, or the CDER Center for Clinical Trial Innovation, was launched on April 15th, and it was intended to enable and amplify innovative approaches to the conduct and design of clinical trials, ultimately to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of drug development. Now, there have been a lot of programs going on for many years within CDER and across the FDA, intended to enable or promote clinical trial innovation. You heard about several of them also already this morning, such as the Complex Innovative Designs Program, which is focusing on new statistical methods or approaches to designing clinical trials, such as master protocols or building in interim analyses, et cetera. You also heard about, had a great question here too, about the use of digital health technologies. So these are things like wearables that can enable patients to more directly contribute to the data that's being generated and collected in a clinical trial. We also have programs to qualify drug development tools, which are intended to sort of give both the FDA and sponsors that reassurance of the reliability, verification, and validity of those tools that are being used in clinical development programs and model-informed drug development, and I could go on, many programs here. And really what C3TI is trying to do is help facilitate those existing programs, help them amplify the great message. I kind of say, like, I'm the cheerleader of all those existing programs to help get that message out to groups like this. You all are learning about clinical trials today and learning about the most innovative approaches, not the approaches that have been around for many, many decades, although those are tried and true and still excellent, but really helping to ensure that as we design the trials of tomorrow, that we are always using the most fit for purpose and appropriate tools and approaches. All right. Now, so yes, did I go the right way? I did. Okay. So how did we get here? This really kind of stems from a personal passion of mine. So in 2020, like many of us, we probably experienced something different during the pandemic, and maybe we stepped up and played different roles trying to help out because we all wanted to contribute to helping folks get through the pandemic. And I played a role in the US government's response on the therapeutics development side of things, what was called Operation Warp Speed at that time. I was not working on the vaccines, I was working on the therapeutics. So this is the drug track over here in CDER. And what we were doing was launching a lot of different trials. Most of them are master protocol trials in collaboration with the NIH through the ACTIV Consortium, which was the Advancing Clinical Trials, Clinical Therapeutics, and Vaccines. And through that process, we experienced all the challenges that every sponsor and CRO was experiencing during the pandemic, which was, it was very hard to get sites ready. It was very hard to launch these new trials. All the trials and sites were trying to make their clinical programs more decentralized because patients were in lockdown. They weren't able to come in for visits as often as they needed to, particularly if you were in the outpatient setting. And so it was very challenging. And yet we had all these tools. We had these ideas around making trials decentralized. We had digital health technologies. We had more advanced, complex, innovative designs. But it wasn't quite getting the level of adoption that we had expected. Now, the great news is, fast forward a couple of years, we had learned we could do some of these things, and we were seeing this tremendous amount of guidance, lots of new programs being released from the FDA. But then suddenly come around 2023, again, a year ago, and we look back and we started to see some backsliding. And we started to ask ourselves, why is this? So we opened up a public docket last October to try and understand from external stakeholders sort of what are those barriers or facilitators, if there are things that work well, we want to know what those are too, that help promote the adoption of innovative approaches to clinical trials. We pulled all that information together, and just a few months ago in March, we had a public meeting to discuss what those were. And what we heard were many different things relating to, oh, we have great examples of this where it's happened. We have phenomenal guidance, but a lot of times we just don't understand how to do this at an operational level. Every trial is a little unique. Every patient population, every drug, every disease, it's always a little bit unique. And so the guidances, while are absolutely necessary, aren't always sufficient. Like, we need to have these conversations around how we implement these new approaches each time we do it so that we can all learn. And this is really where C3TI comes in. So the idea, again, to promote and enable and amplify all the great information related to clinical trial innovation, we want to do this in 3 key ways. We want to share lessons learned. So every time we hear about a great trial that's maybe implemented these selective safety data collection approaches, as Dr. Tanhai mentioned this morning, maybe some of the other programs that I'll talk about in a few minutes, we want to share that broadly, kind of put it together in different ways, thinking about it from an implementation science or dissemination perspective, because one trial in the context of oncology may not be super relevant to someone doing a trial in dermatology. However, there's absolutely lessons learned that can be shared if they're adapted and contextualized in different ways. So we want to sort of play a role in that space. Secondly, we want to just communicate and collaborate. Going out, I think I've been at a meeting every week now since we launched in April, and I'm happy to do it, especially when they're local and arranged by Brenda. But the idea that you can engage with the FDA, and we are open to engage with you, and we want to talk to you about these programs and these trials, especially if you have questions around implementing something novel, is really important. That level of openness and interaction and collaboration, I think, is critical as you move into these novel spaces. It helps to kind of de-risk those areas for something that's not new, or for something that is new. And lastly, we want to expand opportunities for innovation. We recognize we have a lot of programs, as I showed on the slide a few minutes ago, but we also have these new areas such as selective safety data collection. We also have new approaches to making trials more pragmatic or integrated at the point of care. And we need to be able to very nimbly launch sort of new efforts to promote those without having to stand up large new separate entities or separate programs. And this is where C3TI comes in. We sort of have a central operations or infrastructure that allows us to very quickly identify the new area and put together a program where we can interact with sponsors on these new trials trying to apply these new approaches. Also, in addition, underneath what C3TI is doing, we have these 4 key activity areas. I've already mentioned the internal and external communications and engagement. So we have an excellent communication shop that puts together these wonderful slides with fancy things like QR codes that I think are really great when you're out at meetings such as this. We also have a central mailbox, the CDER Clinical Trial Innovation at fda.hhs.gov mailbox, where you can send in any question regarding anything that's innovative related to clinical trials. Doesn't mean C3TI is going to answer all these questions, because I don't know everything about everything that is innovative clinical trials, but I know all the people within CDER. Like, I'm very good at making friends and relationships within CDER, and I will sort of be your friend to the friends, and I will help you connect to them. And all of the different programs that we have across CDER, I sort of reroute, make sure if there's not a program for a particular question to go to, who is the most relevant SME or subject matter expert, and try to connect you with that subject matter expert. So we'll be your telephone operator, your kind of electronic yellow book pages, behind the scenes within CDER. Thirdly, we are launching, or we did launch last Monday actually, a centralized knowledge repository that is available to you as well on the external our website for C3TI, which if you click that link, you can kind of get into, and I'm going to also talk about in a minute. This is a phenomenal, very search-friendly, centralized one-stop shop for all of the different records or links out to information on various different clinical trial innovation activities going on, not just within CDER, but also at the FDA. It's not intended to have everything you need. It's not the encyclopedia of all things clinical trial innovation, but it's like those yellow book pages. You can find a link out to another web page or another program or to a case study or to our guidance, et cetera, that can sort of at least get you started on that path. And we're trying to make it very search friendly. We have a nice taxonomy and tagging, and that will improve over time. And then lastly, we have our demonstration program. This is how we will expand those opportunities for innovation by standing up a centralized program that can launch new projects in different spaces of clinical trial innovation whenever we believe we need a little bit more of a push or a nudge to get things going in the space of adoption. Selective safety data collections have been around for, again, probably 10 years. We've seen some pretty good implementation. I think as Dr. Tanhai mentioned, they'd seen about 10% implementation prior to the ICH guidance. It's hopefully ticking up since then, but we'd love to see it implemented everywhere it could be implemented. And so this is why C3TI will step in and help provide some additional assistance. So the Compass, this is the direct QR code link here to take you to the C3TI external version of the Compass. We do have an internal version as well. Sorry, you guys can't get access to that one, but that's the one that's got a lot more information. I think it's got about twice as many entries. And the only reason they're not shared with you is because they do contain more confidential or commercial confidential information. So we're trying to pull in links to actual protocol submissions, our reviews of those protocols, ultimately the study reports that come in that have the data from those studies, and then also our reviews, such as the marketing application reviews where we reviewed those studies, because how we internally interpret that information is really important and helpful. We also look for precedents. When we're doing reviews, we don't start from scratch. We go back and see what did we think about this type of an approach in this type of a setting in a prior trial. And so our internal Compass has a little bit more information. But as that information becomes publicly available, and particularly, and I'll talk about this in a minute with the demonstration programs, as sponsors share that, it's no longer then considered commercial confidential. We can start to add it into the external version of the C3TI Compass. But the idea, again, behind the Compass is to sort of help share those lessons learned, create a centralized repository where you can find the links to all that information and go back to it on a regular basis. It can hopefully maybe be your one-stop shop for innovation in clinical trial space. So if you don't remember exactly what was that website for the RWE program, although I think we do a pretty good job with search engine optimization. So if you type in Google FDA RWE, you'll find the RWE program. But in case you didn't know exactly how to search something up, you can find those links through the C3TI Compass. So the demonstration program, as I mentioned, this is a centralized sort of infrastructure to launch projects in targeted areas to explore more scalable improvements in the adoption of these select approaches. I think the SSDC is a phenomenal example because you just had the sort of primer on that and you understand really what that is. But again, where we think this might be perfect in the appropriate settings where we have a well-established safety profile and it makes sense in the particular new setting of a new trial in that population, we're still not seeing the level of adoption that we think would be most appropriate. So we want to sort of launch a new project to do demonstrations to help give that a little bit more of a nudge. So as Dr. Tanhai mentioned, when you submit a proposal to be a demonstration trial to the FDA through C3TI, what you'll get is access to additional CDER subject matter experts. So of course, you'll be working with the review team. They are the experts on trials in that particular disease with those types of drugs. But we'll probably also give Mary Tanhai a call, and she might be a subject matter expert. She might even show up at your meeting when you come in to meet with us so that you have the best and brightest who understand the guidance and the policy and its original intent and helps that review team who may have not seen this particular approach. Again, if SSDC has not been used in a therapeutic area before, that review division just wouldn't have had that hands-on experience. They certainly will understand the guidance and have read that, but they may not, again, have that hands-on experience. Dr. Tanhai has had lots of experience, so we'll pull her in or others across the center, and we're working to identify those who have built that experience. So it's not always going to be Dr. Tanhai, if I can help her calm down. Secondly, what else we'll do is, as these trials go through maturity and they're completed and the data is locked and cleaned up and it's sent in and we're starting to review it, guess what? Inspectors come. And now a great thing about REdI was they used to do this, and they will go back to that. They would go out to field offices and you would sort of be there and you'd have compliance people in the room, or you'd have the ORA, Office of Regulatory Affairs inspectors in the room. And it was nice. You could really get to know who's going to show up at your site or at your sponsor and start to audit your trial master file and things. So what we're going to also be trying to do is think about prospectively when it's time for inspections to take place. We're going to be working with our folks in the field and in compliance to have sort of a proactive plan and also make sure that everybody's trained on what these innovative approaches are, because inspectors also may not have had hands-on experience. They may not understand some of the very good questions that we heard from the audience earlier that oh, well, the patients were saying this, it's in the source, but I don't see it in what was reported to the FDA. Why is that? That was because that trial maybe used a selective safety data collection approach. In addition, trials are global, so we are also going to be working on some of the global harmonization aspects. Can't guarantee that we'll always be aligned with our global regulators because they have different sort of regulatory frameworks or country type laws and regulations that they have to deal with, but we will at least work across the aisle to try and make those connections and help them understand what our perspective is at the same time as that they can understand ours. Ultimately, this will hopefully support implementation. Sometimes trials fail or drugs fail, that's okay, but we still want those trials to have a successful implementation of the innovative approach. And then we want to be able to share the information from that and what we learned. And this will ultimately, hopefully, enhance the body of knowledge across the board on clinical trial innovation. As I mentioned, we have 3 project areas. Initially, we'll hopefully be able to launch more because there's sort of economies of scale. This is hopefully a rinse and repeat model for supporting clinical trial innovation. So after these 3, we have a few demonstration trials lined up. We can move into other areas. So the 3 are Bayesian supplementary analyses, and I'm going to walk through each of these so you get a little bit more information. As mentioned this morning, selective safety data collection, and then streamlined trials embedded into clinical practice or STEP. All right, so Bayesian supplementary analyses. So I'm not going to give you guys a training on Bayesian statistics because I probably wouldn't do a very good job, but let's just say it's different from the traditional approach to statistics that's used in clinical trials, which is a much more frequentist-based approach. And what we're trying to do here is increase experience with clinical trialists, sponsors, their development or product development teams, and FDA review staff on using Bayesian statistical methods in their clinical trial settings that are otherwise what we would consider simple. And they're by far anything but simple, but the difference between simple and complex is sort of a terminology that we use to refer to trials that maybe have adaptive elements, multiple arms and agents like in a platform trial or basket trial, et cetera. But the idea is we'll work with the sponsor, C3TI, and our demonstration team will work with the sponsor and the review team and the reviewers who are going to be reviewing that trial's data on implementing some additional supplementary or maybe what you might consider sensitivity analyses prospective in the clinical trial using the Bayesian approaches. And what this does is it doesn't change your primary analysis, so you don't have to worry, will FDA be able to accept my decision because it's a different approach that we've never used before. You've kind of de-risked the use of Bayesian by making it a supplementary analysis. And the benefit is you get experience. You get to use sort of the different programming methods. You might build up some libraries of different models on your computer. Apparently, I'm not a statistician, but apparently they build up all kinds of different programs and they like to rebuild those and put them back together in different ways. But if you've never done Bayesian methods before, you won't have any of those libraries. You don't have anything to start with. So this is a great way, again, on both sides, sponsor side and internally, for us to build some experience and put those libraries together. Most optimally, the trials that we're going to be looking for are phase 3 efficacy and safety trials or non-inferiority trials. Again, not borrowing any data. That's a concept in Bayesian from any previous trials. So this is going to be a very much sort of frequentist approach for the primary analysis. However, I will say, if you are interested in doing a primary Bayesian analysis trial, you can definitely get in touch with us at C3TI. We can potentially discuss how we could collaborate with you and with the Office of Biostatistics within CDER to help support that trial, because we would not be against that at all. Next is the selective safety data collection. I won't have to go through this since you had an excellent training on it this morning. But again, the idea with being a partner in C3TI is that you get access to those additional resources, both from the subject matter expert side on the policy front and those who maybe helped originate the guidance, but also some perspectives, planning and support when it comes time for inspections and potentially with any global regulator harmonization type conversations. I think Dr. Tanhai went over the eligibility criteria as well earlier this morning, but this would be a trial most likely for an approved drug that's seeking a new indication in a very similar population. So you're going to be able to kind of extrapolate that well-established safety profile into that new population, maybe approved, seeking an expanded label, or it's evaluating a very specific safety concern. So this might be something like a post-marketing required trial for a previously approved product. And lastly, it's going to be a trial designed to provide additional evidence of efficacy when the current data to support a well-characterized safety, when the current data do support a well-characterized safety profile. I think I'll maybe use that point to illustrate with all three of these demonstrations and probably all future demonstration projects. We really want these trials in the demonstration to be a regulatory grade. So they are intended to be submitted to the FDA and intended to support some sort of regulatory decision. Because this is something we heard when we were discussing with external stakeholders, that when it's a regulatory trial, that carries a lot more weight precedentially than if it's a non-regulatory trial, because it means the FDA made a decision. They had to sort of weigh in on it. And that's something that we can all look at as helping us understand how are they going to maybe interpret the findings from a trial in a future scenario. Last but not least, and my most favorite, well, I don't have any favorites. They're all great, especially with Dr. Tanhai here, but the Streamlined Trials Embedded into Clinical Practice, or STEP demonstration project. So this is a program that aims to promote the adoption of more pragmatic trial design functions. There is no one single pragmatic trial, although I think Lung Pragmatica, which is an oncology trial, is probably pretty far to the most pragmatic it could possibly be. But when you think about creating a trial and making it more pragmatic, there's all sorts of different elements that you could be exploring. You could be exploring the eligibility criteria. You could be exploring the endpoints, ways to make those easier to be implemented. Ultimately, you're looking to see how can you simplify the trial such that it could maybe even be conducted in a more point of care like setting, because this is where most of the patients are. Again, if we have to bring all the patients into Johns Hopkins, which is a phenomenal academic medical center, it's going to be really challenging to reach out and get patients from the panhandle of Maryland, right there. That's very far away. So thinking about how we can streamline these trials and help us bring it back into the point of care setting, which has a lot of other benefits. As far as other advantages, obviously it can make the trials more resource efficient. While FDA is not in the business of making trials, cheaper or easier to conduct, I think kind of we all should be, because as you make trials cheaper and easier to conduct, you're able to sort of launch and run them more efficiently and more quickly. And that will ultimately get products to patients faster if they're safe and effective, or it'll help us sort of find the products that aren't safe and effective more rapidly, which is important as well. It could also help us attract broader study populations, as I mentioned, because we don't have to have our patients traveling, 100 plus miles to get into our studies. And it can also ensure that all of the study objectives can be completed as robustly as possible. As for the eligibility criteria, the trials that we would be looking for in this particular demonstration would be those looking to test out or explore and incorporate any sort of pragmatic design element. It doesn't have to be completely pragmatic across the board. There's sort of all these different features of your trial you could be considering to make more pragmatic. Maybe you want to add some decentralized trial features, use a digital health technology, maybe even use selective safety data collection to reduce the burden of safety data that needs to be collected, which might enable that trial to be sort of conducted in a more closer to point of care type setting. Secondly, it most likely should be a trial later in pre-market development when the safety profile is reasonably well established. This just allows us to sort of kind of more focus on certain things and not have to worry about all the novelty that might be associated with a new product that we don't have a whole lot of experience with. Could also be a post-approval trial. This could be a product being repurposed for other uses, expanded indication, new populations, et cetera. I'm going to kind of just round out here, and then we can move into the questions. I think we've got plenty of time for questions. With, this concept of how do you promote clinical trial innovation? It's kind of nebulous. And first of all, most people, like, what does an innovation even mean, right? Because some of these things we've been doing for decades. I think the pragmatic clinical trial design as a concept someone told me it was published in like the 70s. So this is not new stuff. Yet we're trying to promote it. And C3TI thought about this for a long time before we ultimately launched, and we put together sort of what we call a logic model or a program theory. And this will help us evaluate it down the road, maybe a year or 2 years from now, to see, did we make a difference with any of these new activities that C3TI launched with? So you can see just on the screen, I'm going to just highlight a couple of them. Initially, what we're primarily going to be looking at are short-term outcomes, such as, are folks finding the compass useful? Do they actually go in and search it? Can they find what they were looking for? If they go to our website, if they send an email or ask a question to get connected to a new program or to a point of contact within CDER, are we able to respond to those? So we track things like how long do folks stay on the C3TI website, on the Compass. We are triaging and tracking all of the triaging on our inquiries to our mailbox. So this allows us to kind of evaluate over time if we're making progress, if we're doing the things we least said we would do. As you move a little bit further down the road, hopefully we'd like to see more adoption of these innovative approaches in clinical trials. So probably C3TI might redo that analysis that Dr. Tanhai mentioned this morning, where you went in and looked at the trials that were sort of published over a period of time and see, did they do more selective safety data collection? Hopefully we would like to see that they did. And maybe point that back to C3TI. I'll probably just shower all the praises to Mary Tanhai and all of her presentations for promoting that. But then, of course, in the long term, as clinical trials do use the most innovative approaches and improve over time, that should ultimately improve outcomes for patients. Like at the end of the day, we want to be able to have drug development that's as efficient, as effective as possible, because that helps us get safe and effective medicines to patients. So with that, I think we can go ahead and turn it over to questions. And of course, if you have any questions that come to mind afterwards or something maybe a little bit more private, you can connect with me personally, or you can reach out to C3TI via the information on the screen.
Thank you, Dr. Bugin. So again, we encourage you to come up to the mics for in-house. We like to see some participation in real life. And then we'll alternate as, you know, as fairly as I could. We'll alternate and then we'll do it on online. So let's start with the first question here in-house.
Thank you for an easy way to remember the acronym, C3PO and C3TI. So the question is, you said that you're going to be a facilitator between the sponsor and the review division and help things faster, and then we can help innovation by making things be publicly disclosed. Operationally, right, meetings with our division, it's still going to be the same, or will we get separate meetings with C3TI? And what's the timeline for reviewing things that we want information? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So I wouldn't have a lot of friends if I said we'd have to do more meetings or do the meetings faster internally. I'd probably have a lot of friends externally. But we also just didn't want to short circuit the regulatory review process. That's a lot of R's. What C3TI hopefully will be able to do, because we've identified a trial in advance of any of those meetings to discuss the trial as a demonstration, we'll know it's coming. We'll kind of have some advanced warning, and the review division will know it's coming too, because the proposal is going to go directly into their IND, and they'll actually be the first persons to tell C3TI, yes, that does look like it would be a good fit for the demonstration program. And then C3TI sort of affirms and acknowledges that. And then from that point going forward, when you request a meeting to discuss that trial, and FDA does meetings all the time with sponsors to discuss the protocol. So if you want to come in early, even if you've got like a 2-page synopsis of your trial, you know, most likely FDA will grant that meeting and try to give you feedback if there's enough in there to give you feedback on, to help you ensure you have the most effective and efficient design possible. So what C3TI again will do is sort of work in the space of that timeline to make sure all the relevant subject matter experts can be pulled in. So you get like a little bit of an extra support from C3TI in the coordinating function. It won't necessarily, again, short circuit the review team. They're going to still be there. It just hopefully brings in those extra experts. The other benefit is we'll be tracking that entire interaction. So, you know, it takes, you know, many years for a trial to be sort of designed and then launched, and then the data to come in, and then, you know, finally be submitted and so on. So C3TI will hopefully have sort of a record alongside of the regular records that are already going to be in place to help ensure that all the subject matter experts are aware and are facilitating throughout the way. Secondly, I think there should be a higher level expectation when we say, you know, trial X with sponsor Y is part of the demonstration. Like that kind of should give you a little bit of a sense that FDA is watching this very closely and really does want at least the implementation of the innovative approach to be successful, because we know this is going to be looked at as a possible case study, as an example of how well to do this. Again, can't guarantee a drug's going to work or that a trial will be successful. There's just so many different factors at play, but at least the way we're implementing the innovative approach will be.
I just love the passion of our speakers. You can tell they are fully immersed in what they're doing, and their sole objective is to help you guys. Thank you. Next question in-house, please.
Hi, so understandably, a lot of these examples focus on later stage trials. I'm wondering if you're envisioning an expansion of focus areas that could be applied in like proof of concept or some earlier stage trials.
Yeah, it's a great question. So since we launched, and even maybe before we launched, there have been other proposals internally for possible demonstration project areas, coming out of some of the other existing programs. I'll use the Model-Informed Drug Development or the Quantitative Medicine Center of Excellence that was mentioned earlier this morning. So in that space, there may be opportunities for something a little bit earlier or more upstream in drug development where C3TI could partner to help demonstrate. I wasn't aware of this, but our commissioner said it this morning, and he's the boss. So I guess maybe AI could also be a place where C3TI could potentially partner. I know there's going to be a speaker later today talking about some of our efforts to help put out some guidance around artificial intelligence and machine learning and drug development. And so as we get that guidance out, there might be opportunities to potentially partner with trial sponsors for demonstrations there. I think a lot more needs to be sorted out, but yes, I think that has been explored.
Thank you.
See, we learn as well. So let's go online for a question, please.
To what extent can C3TI assist with Pediatric Research Equity Act or PREA required pediatric studies? Will C3TI consult with the Pediatric Review Committee and vice versa?
Great question. So I don't think C3TI would necessarily get involved in working through a pediatric study plan or a trial intended to fulfill a pediatric study plan requirement under PREA, unless they were looking to explore one of these innovative approaches in the demonstration. Or maybe another innovative approach. And let's say, again, there was maybe a digital health technology or a wearable that might enable the trial to be more effectively conducted in pediatric patients. We might be able to help facilitate getting connections with the relevant subject matter experts within the center to help them with that process. But again, we're probably not going to play any sort of a direct facilitator role with the regular processes there.
Thank you. If you have questions in-house, come please take advantage. This is your time. Question, please.
Hi, thank you, Kevin. My name is Jess Ross. I'm from Unlearn AI. And speaking about AI and speaking about, these technologies that are coming into development, I think that you have a real opportunity at C3TI to incorporate these into clinical trials at a larger scale. I know particularly in diseases like Alzheimer's disease, there are many, many trials that are coming out, and then the patient pool is going to get smaller and smaller. So I think I'm wondering about, it seems like many of the programs are geared towards sponsors, and there are other opportunities and companies that are developing technologies that could be broadly applied across trials. And especially knowing that trials take so long to happen, and if people want to see an example of a successful trial or FDA acceptance of a certain technology, it could be a decade away. So I wanted to see if what your thoughts are on the opportunity here with C3TI and being able to incorporate some of these technologies that could be broadly advantageous to society.
It's a great question. I don't think it's initially anything C3TI will be able to cover, but certainly there is a lot of innovation occurring in the clinical research, CRO space or other service provider space that's helping to enable clinical trials. For example, the use of AI to maybe enrich enrollment. I mean, certain pieces of that we'll probably see in the context of the drug development program, but many pieces, like if let's say a CRO or site is using Gen AI to help with informed consent, we might not see all of the detail. We would see the source of the actual informed consent document, the probably very 35-page plus long one that's for the lawyers most likely, but we wouldn't necessarily see the versions that were created with the additional Gen AI, maybe for translations, or if they were to say create a chat bot or something to help patients understand the informed consent document, just because that's not typically something that we're reviewing on the upfront side when the protocols are being designed. But I think it's a really important question, and it is something that we, FDA probably needs to think about how we can help disseminate some of those learnings more broadly. Because otherwise, I think potentially those become like competitive advantages for some of that industry that is helping to promote clinical research, and not something that could be shared more broadly.
Thank you. Next question in-house, please.
So thank you, Kevin. I have a question about you talk about the Bayesian software. So is so do we upload the data and run the data analysis there, or can we download the algorithm and run on in Python or an R software, or how did it work? Can you elaborate about this?
If I understand the question, or maybe also, let me just also demystify. So FDA is pretty unique in that we will reconduct the analyses pretty much ourselves. Even though we do have the summary data, we'll go and we want the source data and we want the analysis programs and we want to reconduct those internally. So when you submit to the FDA, you'll have to submit that data. And I think we also require the programs as well.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Question online, please.
What advances do you or do you not see occurring with informed consent to ensure that decentralized trials are diverse and inclusive of participants with different levels of access to real-time electronic document receipt and transmission?
Wow, great question. This is the one downside of being the clinical trial innovation guy. You get like all the questions. But, you know, I guess I'll just share my personal perspective on this. And I think maybe you can raise this later with the speaker on AI from CDER Center, because I think AI could potentially be very useful in the space of informed consent. I mentioned earlier that you know, we have to have the informed consent document. There are a lot of required aspects to it that we simply can't, you know, change. But once you have that required set of data elements and information within the informed consent, you can then take it further. You can figure out what are the best ways to say translate it, maybe put it in different education level ranges. And AI is very good about doing this. It still requires a lot of verification, and you have to trust, you know, go through and make sure you can trust what's been created, but it can help accelerate that process. And then I think something else that's been published in literature has been the use of maybe a chat bot. So you can almost have the patients have a follow-up conversation with a bot that's pretty much all based in the informed consent document. So I think those types of tools will potentially help to improve the comprehension and understanding of the informed consent process. But I think at the end of the day, the basic requirements are still always going to be there.
Thank you. Nobody's up at the mics. Next question online, please.
Regarding Compass, do sponsors have a say on what becomes open to the public link before data, which used to be confidential, is released?
Oh, this is a great question. If I could have
All
asked-
your questions
yeah.
are great.
Yeah, no, and I almost should have asked this one myself, because it gives me an opportunity to say, yes, so sponsors, particularly if there's going to be any information added to the Compass that's coming out of the demonstration programs, they will have the opportunity to say what is sort of off limits for disclosure during the proposal process. So if you look on our website where you have information around what needs to be sent into their IND to be considered for a demonstration, they have to outline, in addition to some of the other important eligibility criteria that are listed, they'll have to outline sort of what, again, is off limit for disclosure. Otherwise, we'll consider sort of the other top line information to be possibly for available for disclosure. Beyond the demonstration program, the FDA is, as always, going to protect commercial confidential information. There won't be anything shared that's not already in the public domain. The good news is there's quite a bit nowadays in the public domain. Most studies that are being conducted under IND, they have to report to clinicaltrials.gov. So a lot of the high-level study data elements are there, such as the primary objectives, the population, et cetera. So, I mean, there's a lot already. And if we know that a sponsor is implementing something innovative in one of these trials, assuming the sponsors agrees with that, that's something that we could simply just point to and say, hey, that's a trial. And then maybe the additional information could be gathered that way.
Are you good for two more?
Yeah, sure. I don't know when
Online?
lunch is.
Online, please.
Okay, another question from someone trying to access Compass. Do you need permission to access this?
No, so the external version of Compass is available. You don't need permission. It's on the FDA website right now.
That was a quick one. Last question then for Dr. Bugin, online, please.
How can innovative study designs such as adaptive trials or decentralized trials affect efficiency and effectiveness of drug development and regulatory decision making?
Great question. So I think as noted in maybe some of the demonstration programs. So I'll use sort of the streamlined trials embedded into practice example. These different approaches can make the trial, I would say, more optimized, so we don't have unnecessary burden on either the sites or on the patients to participate in these clinical trials. And when you sort of decrease that burden on what the patients have to do, maybe how far they have to travel, how many visits they have to come in person for, suddenly you make the trials more accessible. And as we make trials more accessible, the number one reason trials take so long is like the enrollment. It takes a long time. You probably screen fail way more patients on an order of magnitude than the ones you accept into the trial. And so as you increase the capture and you have more patients potentially participating, you're hopefully going to have more enrolling, and you're going to hit those enrollment targets a lot more quickly. And secondly, I think it also helps sites and the ability of sites to get activated more rapidly, because there may not be as many stringent requirements. Now, I say that with a grain of salt because new things, innovative things, can sometimes actually add more burden initially as we get more experience with them. So sometimes you might be doing the traditional way plus the innovative way the first time you do something at a particular site. But over time, it will build that sort of muscle memory and experience, and it hopefully will lead to more efficient clinical trials on the operational piece too.
Thank you. I see some people taking notes. That means we're probably going to have a quiz later on. Thank you very much,
you.
Dr. Bugin.